"You don't touch the flag," the tomb guard said, his voice low, cutting through the airport's chaos like a blade. Travelers froze, phones lowered, as the manager's hand hovered over the casket's stars and stripes. To the crowd, it was just a delay, another annoyance in a busy terminal. To Sergeant Samuel Harper, it was a line no one crossed. Not for schedules, not for convenience. What no one knew, not the manager, not the onlookers, was that the promise driving Harper's stand was forged in blood under a desert sky, and the soldier in that casket had saved his life. But the real shock was coming, and it wore the stripes of a general already on his way to set things right. Welcome to Peter's Late Night Stories. Before we continue this story, let us know in the comments where in the world are you watching from. If these stories speak to you, hit that subscribe button to support the channel, because tomorrow we have another special story for you. In the heart of Washington, D.C. is International Airport where travelers rush toward gates and announcements drone overhead. One man stood still. Sergeant Samuel Harper, a tomb guard of Arlington's unknown soldier, wore his uniform like a vow. White gloves, pristine shoes polished to a mirror shine, and the badge of the tomb guard gleaming on his chest. His face was composed, eyes fixed forward, but beneath the scarlet and black of his uniform, a weight pressed against his heart. Today, his duty was not at the tomb, but here in a place of chaos to escort a fallen brother home. Private First Class. Daniel Walsh, just 25 years old, had laughed under desert stars, shared stories of home, and made a promise with Sam. "If I don't make it, bring me home right." 3 days ago, that promise became real. Danny was gone, killed in a classified mission in the Middle East. Now his flag-draped casket waited on the tarmac, and Sam would not let him down. Every step he took today was for Danny, for the boy who loved baseball, who dreamed of flying planes, who died saving his squad. Across the terminal, Margaret Walsh Maggie to her friends stood with her granddaughter Emma. At 70, Maggie's face bore the lines of a military nurse who'd seen too many wars. From Vietnam to today, her son Danny was her pride, her light. Now she clutched Emma's small hand, waiting to say goodbye. Emma, just 10, looked up with wide eyes. "Grandma, is that Danny's plane?" she asked, her voice soft but piercing. Maggie knotted her throat too tight to speak. She'd sent her husband to war, then her son. Now she was here to bring him home. But not everyone saw the weight of this moment. In an office overlooking the terminal, James Thornton, the airport's operations manager, stared at his tablet, his fingers drumming an impatient rhythm. A 98% on-time departure rate was his obsession, his badge of honor. Framed certificates of efficiency, awards lined as walls, and digital screens tracked flights, gates, and delays. A military procession through the main concourse. That was a disruption he couldn't afford. "We can't have this," he muttered to his assistant Sarah. "Why wasn't I told earlier? The service corridors are there for a reason. Get it rerouted." Sarah cleared her throat. "Sir, the airport director approved the main concourse route." Thornton's jaw tightened. "This airport runs on precision, not pageantry," he snapped already, calculating the minutes lost during the peak 2:30 rush. "With departures in that window, we can't afford delays." Back in the arrivals hall, Sam stood like a pillar against the polished floors. Travelers rushed past, some snapping photos of his striking uniform, others too busy to notice. His mind drifted to 3 days ago, to the commanding officer's office, the folded letterhead, the words that had made his stomach drop. Private First Class Daniel Walsh killed in action, then the assignment. "You've been selected for escort duty, Sergeant. Bring him home." Sam's fingers brushed the photograph in his breast pocket, worn soft from years of handling. It showed him and Danny, arms slung around each other, grinning under a desert moon. They'd met in basic training, two opposites thrown together. Danny was all heart, quick to laugh, quick to act. Sam was the compass, always calculating, always steady. "You think too much, Sam," Danny would say, his voice cutting through the night. "Sometimes you just feel it." Over time, their rivalry turned to respect, then to a brotherhood forged in the crucible of war. Afghanistan had tested them. Danny's laughter was a lifeline in the barracks, a shield against the tension. Sam stayed in the background, watching planning. "You're my compass, Sam," Danny had said one quiet night, stars bright above their outpost. "I lead the charge, but you make sure we're heading right." Those words had settled into Sam's chest, becoming part of him. Their third tour changed everything. An ambush, sudden and brutal. Gunfire shouts in Danny's voice, "Sam on your left." He'd tackled Sam to the ground as bullets tore through the air. 3 seconds that saved Sam's life. That night, as medics patched them up, Danny brushed off. "Thanks. That's what brothers do," he'd said, but his eyes held a new shadow, a glimpse of mortality. Months later, Danny talked more about home, his mother, Maggie, who'd sent him care packages, his little sister, Emma, who mailed crayon drawings to Uncle Danny the hero. He carried her artwork in his helmet, a talisman against the darkness. The night before his final mission, they sat outside their barracks, the air heavy with premonition. "If anything happens," Sam, Danny said, his usual grin gone, "bring me home proper, full honors through the main concourse, not some back exit. Dad would have wanted it done right." Sam nodded, the weight of the promise sinking in. "I'll make sure of it, Danny. No matter what." 3 days later, the news came. Danny hadn't returned. Details were classified sparse. Sam stood alone in the barracks, the photograph in his hand, the promise no longer a what-if, but a duty. Now at the airport, as the transport plane taxied closer, that promise burned in his chest. The aircraft door opened with a mechanical hiss, and the honor guard emerged, their movements, precise, deliberate. The flag-draped casket appeared at stars and stripes, a stark contrast to the terminal's gray. Ground crew removed their caps, heads bowed. Sam took his place beside the casket, his scarlet uniform of flame against the cold efficiency around him. James Thornton strode through the terminal clipboard, clutched like a shield. "We'll use the service corridors," he told his staff as they hurried toward the arrivals hall. "It's efficient, won't disrupt thousands of passengers. The military can have their ceremony at the cemetery." Sarah, the young security officer, hesitated. "But sir, the director approved the main route." Thornton waved her off. "I'm responsible for this terminal. We don't stop for parades." The procession began, each step measured, dignified, challenging the frantic pace around them. Travelers slowed, sensing something sacred. An elderly man nodded respectfully. A group of teenagers whispered. A businessman checked his watch, then paused, caught by the sight. Sam's face remained composed, but the photograph in his pocket anchored him. This was about Danny, about a debt that transcended schedules. Thornton approached before the procession reached the terminal doors. "Sergeant," he said, voice low, "I've prepared an alternative route." He unfolded a map pointing to a highlighted path. "Of these service corridors lead directly to the pickup area. It's faster." Sam's response was immediate, unwavering. "This is Private First Class Daniel Walsh, United States Army. We will proceed through the main terminal as arranged at the appropriate pace for escorting the fallen." Thornton leaned closer, his tone sharper. "These corridors were designed for movements that shouldn't disrupt operations, shouldn't disrupt." Sam echoed, his eyes hardening. "Private Walsh will be escorted with full honors through the main terminal." Thornton jabbed at the map. "There's a service elevator to the loading area. You'd avoid delaying thousands of passengers." "The disruption is temporary," Sam said, his voice steady. "The dishonor of skulking through back corridors would be permanent." Thornton's composure cracked. He signaled Sarah. "This is absurd. Airport protocols supersede your parade." Sarah approached, her hand on her radio, but her eyes fell on the casket, the flag catching sunlight from a nearby window. Her hand dropped. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "Yes," Thornton snapped. "We need this procession redirected for operational reasons." Sarah looked at the casket, then at the growing crowd of onlookers. "Sir, the director approved this route. I don't see an operational issue justifying a change." Thornton flushed. "I'm responsible for this terminal. These delays cascade through the system." The crowd was larger now. Their silence, a pocket of reverence in the bustling terminal. An elderly man in a USMC cap, George Miller, stepped forward. "I served in Vietnam," he said, his voice rough but clear. "I lost brothers who never came home. This soldier deserves better than a back hallway." His words rippled through the crowd. A businessman pocketed his phone. A mother whispered to her curious child. A flight attendant stopped mid-stride. Maggie Walsh moved closer, Emma clutching her hand. "My Danny," Maggie said, her voice trembling, but strong. "He loved baseball. Dreamed of flying planes. He died saving his squad. He deserves this honor." The terminal grew quieter, the weight of her words sinking in. Thornton, undeterred, stepped forward, his hand raised to halt the procession. "Sergeant, I'm ordering you to redirect." Sam's gaze didn't waver. "There are regulations older than your airport," he said. "They govern how we honor those who gave everything." Lieutenant Walsh died serving his country in full view of the world. He will not be hidden in death. Thornton's hand brushed the edge of the flag, a ripple passing through the fabric. A collective gasp rolled through the crowd. Time seemed to collapse. Sam moved with fluid precision, his hand closing around Thornton's wrist, gentle but firm. "Don't touch the flag," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Yet it carried through the hushed terminal. The words were a truth unyielding, rooted in centuries of military honor. Thornton's face registered shock, then indignation. "Take your hands off me," he hissed. "This is assault. I'll have security escort you out." The crowd's silence deepened. George Miller removed his cap, placing it over his heart. A flight attendant wiped a tear. A businessman closed his laptop. What Thornton didn't grasp was that touching the flag was more than a mistake. It was a desecration, an insult to Danny, his family, and every soldier who'd served. Sam held Thornton's wrist for 3 seconds, then released him, his face betraying nothing. Veterans in the crowd recognized the restraint, the depth of betrayal suppressed beneath his composure. "The flag represents a soldier's dedication." Sam set his voice steady despite the emotion beneath the values they upheld, the sacrifice they made. "It is not to be touched by anyone outside the honor guard." Thornton rubbed his wrist, defiance flickering. "This is my terminal," he said, voice lower now. "I determine how military personnel are authorized to protect the flag and casket from desecration." Sam cut in, his tone final. "Our actions are guided by protocols older than your position or this airport." The crowd's reverence grew palpable. Travelers stood motionless, many with heads bowed as if the terminal had become hallowed ground. "That's Danny's flag," came a small voice from the crowd's edge. Emma Walsh, perched in her grandmother's arms, pointed at the casket, her words slicing through the tension. Maggie held her tighter, her weathered face a map of grief and pride. Her eyes met Sam's, a silent acknowledgement of shared loss. Captain Evelyn Carter, the airport director and a retired Army officer, approached with measured steps. Her uniform was civilian, but her bearing was military, her eyes taking in the scene, the honor guard and information. Thornton standing awkwardly, the casket at the center of this unexpected standoff. "Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Step aside." Turning to Sam, her tone softened. "Sergeant, my apologies. Your procession will continue through the main terminal as planned." Thornton began to protest, clutching his clipboard, but Carter silenced him with a raised hand. She understood what Thornton couldn't, that some moments transcend metrics, that traditions carry a weight no efficiency report could measure. She took the terminal's microphone, her voice echoing through the vast space. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? A fallen soldier is being escorted through our terminal today. As a sign of respect, we ask that you join us in forming a corridor of honor for his final journey home." The terminal transformed. Travelers who'd been rushing to gates stopped moving deliberately to the concourse's edges. Businessmen closed laptops mid-email. Parents gathered children whispering about sacrifice. Airport staff abandoned posts, forming lines along the path. The chaotic terminal became a solemn passage. A businessman who'd complained about delays now stood with head bowed. A teenage girl slipped her phone into her pocket, eyes wide with understanding. George Miller stood straighter, his hand in a precise salute. An elderly man in a wheelchair rose, supported by his wife, his trembling hand finding his brow. The procession resumed, Sam at its head, the flag a beacon through the corridor of respect. Not a word was spoken, not a phone raised. Even the terminal's announcement seemed to hush as if the building itself held its breath. Sam's face remained impassive, but his eyes carried a new light acknowledgement that his stand had awakened, something powerful. Across the crowd, his gaze met Maggie's. No words passed, none needed. In that glance was a promise kept, honor maintained, sacrifice recognized. Maggie nodded once a soldier's acknowledgement from one generation to another. Outside, the hearse waited, its black surface gleaming in the afternoon sun. The honor guard placed Danny's casket with care, the flag still vibrant against the gray tarmac. Maggie and Emma approached Emma, clutching a single daisy. Maggie took Sam's hand, her grip strong despite her years. "You kept your promise." "Sam," she said, tears brimming, but not falling. Sam reached into his pocket, pulling out the worn photograph of him and Danny laughing under a desert moon. He pressed it into her hand. "For you, Maggie. For Emma." Emma stepped forward, placing the daisy on the casket. "You're my hero, Danny," she whispered, her small voice breaking the silence. Travelers watched from a distance, some wiping tears, others standing in silent tribute. Thorne approached his clipboard, gone, his head bowed. "Sergeant, I was wrong," he said, his voice barely audible. "I didn't understand." Sam met his eyes, then nodded his silence, a quiet forgiveness. The hearse pulled away, carrying Danny on his final journey to Arlington. Sam's salute held steady, until the vehicle vanished, his posture, unwavering despite the weight of the moment. What began as a bureaucratic standoff had become something profound, a reminder that some traditions endure because they speak to our need to honor sacrifice with dignity. That night, Sam returned to the tomb of the unknown soldier. Under a starlit sky, he paced his watch. 21 steps a turn, a pause, then 21 steps again. The wind carried the weight of his duty, a reminder that some promises outlast time. In a world that rushes forward, some stand still to honor those who gave everything. Let us remember them not just in silence, but in the courage to stand for what's right. For Danny, for every soldier who never came home, and for those who keep their promises no matter the cost. This is the story of a tomb guard and a fallen soldier, of a crowded airport in Washington, D.C., of a photograph and a promise that held fast against the rush of time. It's a reminder that, at the tomb of the unknown soldier, where every step is measured and every salute is sacred, the greatest tribute to the fallen is standing firm for their honor. So, pause today. Think of Sam, of Danny, of the countless heroes whose names we carry in silence. Share their story, not just to honor them, but to remind us all that duty is not just in the act, but in the heart that refuses to forget. And if you find yourself at Arlington, stand before the tomb, watch the guard's steady pace, and listen. You might just hear the pulse of a nation strong and unbroken through the weight of sacrifice.